Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining this talk, Deploy N applications to N clusters using Argo CD ApplicationSet. My name is Dewan Ahmed. I'm a developer advocate at Red Hat based out of Moncton, New Brunswick, which is in the eastern part of Canada. I love everything cloud native, and besides work, I love to play ping pong and pool. I'm also a freelance career coach. If you'd like to connect with me, those are my LinkedIn and Twitter handles. We have a packed agenda today with a demo-heavy talk. We'll go over Argo CD and ApplicationSet and how these projects can help you deploy multiple applications to multiple clusters. If you scan the QR code or if you go to the GitHub repository at the bottom right corner of your screen, you can see step-by-step instructions of the demo, which I'll be showing you today. I'll be using OpenShift and OpenShift GitOps, but the demo I have on the GitHub repository is for vanilla Kubernetes clusters and using open source Argo CD. So you can do that on your own. Now, in order to learn GitOps, let's understand GitOps in one slide. So the principles are using Git as the single source of truth. We also use Git to make any changes to our system, our clusters. So we don't do kubectl commands directly on the cluster, rather than we make changes in the Git, and the GitOps tool picks up those changes and reflects that on the cluster. And all these changes that we're making will also be observable and verifiable. Now, what is Argo CD? Argo CD is an open source GitOps continuous delivery tool for Kubernetes. And Argo CD also uses Git as the single source of truth. And because it is installed on Kubernetes, it's declarative. That means rather than being imperative and running a bunch of scripts, you can declaratively write how you want your application manifest to be reflected on the Kubernetes cluster. And by being developer-centric, your developers could do a Git push rather than a kubectl command. Now, in terms of security, Argo CD offers OIDC and OAuth2 based authorization. Argo CD also offers multi-tenancy and RBAC for authorizations. And all the API calls and applications calls are verifiable. Argo CD trivializes rollback, and also any kind of application diff are verifiable both from the CLI and UI. Considering all these points, your engineering team will have a higher velocity in deploying the applications to Kubernetes. Now, Argo CD is installed as a Kubernetes controller, and the API is a gRPC and REST server, which exposes the API to the Argo CD UI, Argo CD CLI, or via CI/CD system. The repository maintains an internal cache of the Git repository, and once a PR merges via a webhook event, Argo CD picks up the change. And if the desired state in the Git is different from the actual state in the cluster, the application, the Argo CD application is called out of sync. And then you have to do a sync operation in order to sync the application. Now, if your deployment is a bit complex, you can run sync hooks, which basically run scripts before, during, or after the sync operation. Now, enough talk. Let's dive into an Argo CD demo. Hello, everyone. The first demo is on Argo CD. This is based on OpenShift, but if you'd like to follow a Kubernetes-based demo, you can go to this GitHub repository and follow the instructions. This is based on a vanilla Kubernetes. Coming back to OpenShift, we are installing an operator called Red Hat OpenShift GitOps operator. This operator out of the box gives you an Argo CD instance and also installs ApplicationSet controller under OpenShift-GitOps namespace. To begin with, I'll connect to the Argo CD UI. For that, I'll need the default Argo CD admin password, and we can find that under workload, secrets, under OpenShift GitOps project. OpenShift GitOps cluster is the name of that secret. I'll copy the secret and open Argo CD UI from here. The username is admin, and the password is what I just copied. Argo CD has a concept of projects. Now, this is not OpenShift projects. This is Argo CD projects where you can group your deployment applications. You can also add repositories. If it's a private repository, you can connect using your password or token. The repository which we're using for this demo is a public repository, so we don't need to connect it in advance. So let me copy the URL of the repository and try to create an application. You can create application from the Argo CD UI or using Argo CD CLI, but I'll create the application using the OpenShift console. So under the operator, I'm going into application, create application. Let me give it a name, Argo sample app. And then under destination, I have to give the server location. Since it's the same server where Argo CD is installed, it's the default Kubernetes service. And the namespace, I'll use OpenShift GitOps. You can choose to deploy in a different namespace, and you have to add a label that says managed by OpenShift GitOps. But for now, I'll use OpenShift GitOps namespace. Project is the Argo CD project, which is default. That's the only project that's on the Argo CD server now. So only default project. So that's what we are using now. Under source, I'm adding the repository URL, which I just copied. And under path, customize Nginx OpenShift. So this is the path where my manifest files are. For sync options or sync policy, which basically says that if you'd like to automatically sync the application when there is a change in Git repository, or you'd like to manually sync, either clicking the sync button or using the CLI, I won't go with the automated route now. So it's a manual sync option, and I'll create the application. Once I hit create on the Argo CD console, I can see the app was created. If I go inside, I can see that my three resources, the service, deployment, and the route were created. And if you look at the customization file, you can see that there was a name prefix prod dash, which you can see in all three resources as well. Now, once I sync the application, you'll see that the applications will sync, and it turns green, it's synced, sync OK, and you see the single pod that is being created. Now, if I'd like to change the number of replicas from 1 to 3, so let's see if I make a change. So going the GitOps route, making change to the Git repository, and seeing the change reflect on the cluster. I'm not going to go through the pull request route. I'll push directly to the main. So once I do that, if I hit refresh, I'll hover over here. See, the synced options should turn yellow, out of sync. So it's out of sync now. And I can click on appdiff to see the difference, what changed. So when I scroll down, you can see on line 110, so the number of replicas in the cluster is 1, but in Git repository, expected or desired is 3, and hence the application is out of sync. All we need to do is hit sync, synchronize, and the application will go in sync. All right, so we can delete the application either from here, Argo CD UI, or we can delete the application from OpenShift console as well. Let's delete the application. I can create the same application, but let's use auto sync now. So I'll say this is Argo CD sample app. Let's say this is auto sync. Destination, the same cluster and namespace, same Argo CD project, under source, I'm using the same source that we used, customize Nginx OpenShift. And then under sync policy, I'll choose automated and then hit the prune and self field. What prune does is if you delete a resource from Git, then Argo CD will delete that on the cluster as well. And if you check self heal, then even if you delete a resource directly on the cluster, Argo CD will not let your app go out of sync, and it will prevent your app from even seeing that change. So let's keep those two options and create the app again. And if we go back to application, so the new application was created. And this time, if you notice, we didn't have to click sync because it's auto sync. The app was automatically synced. So let's try to delete one of the resource to see the self heal feature in action. So for that, I'll log in to the cluster. So let me log in. And I'll switch to OpenShift GitOps. So I'm already OpenShift GitOps project. So let me check the service, OC get service. What are the service I'm getting? Okay, I see the prod Nginx. So let me delete that service. OC delete service prod Nginx. And then observe what happens on Argo CD UI. So if you observe here, you don't see the app going out of sync. And that's because even if we try to delete that resource, and which you can see the service was in fact deleted, but it got recreated. Even if you refresh, you see the service is right there. So Argo CD prevented that operation from happening. So that's a pretty powerful feature with auto sync and self heal. We created the app using OpenShift console. You can very much delete the app from Argo CD UI. It's using the same set of APIs, so it will be the same operation. And that's the demo with Argo CD, deploying a single application from single Git repository to a same cluster. In the next demo, we'll see Argo CD ApplicationSet, where we deploy application to multiple clusters. Now, that's all good and nice, but what if you want to deploy Argo CD applications to multiple Kubernetes clusters? Or what if you have a monorepo where different folders represent different applications? You have to have multiple Argo CD applications. So introducing Argo CD ApplicationSet, which lets you do all of the above using a single CRD. Now, ApplicationSet, if you see line number 2, is a custom resource definition. So the kind is ApplicationSet. And this is just one example of list generator. So there are different types of generator. This generator lets you target multiple clusters, which are listed as elements. And this template is actually an Argo CD applications, which dynamically injects the value for cluster and URL field. So you can think of Argo CD ApplicationSet as an application factory, which takes on an ApplicationSet CRD as an input and then outputs one or more Argo CD applications. So Argo CD ApplicationSet does not connect to Kubernetes cluster. Argo CD does that. It does not create or manage Kubernetes resources. The only type of resource it creates are Argo CD applications. Argo CD in turns manages your Kubernetes resources, and it also is limited to the Argo CD namespace for open source or OpenShift GitOps namespace for OpenShift. So you can think of an ApplicationSet controller as a controller that is installed alongside Argo CD in the same namespace, and it leverages Argo CD to do the heavy lifting, but it templates. It uses templates to create multiple Argo CD applications targeting multiple Kubernetes clusters and namespace. So enough talk. Again, let's jump into an Argo CD ApplicationSet controller demo. In the second part of the demo, we'll use Argo CD ApplicationSet to deploy applications to multiple clusters. Let's look at the example. In these examples, we have some generators, but specifically we'll use list generator and git generator directory example. Let's start with list generator. Now, in the list example, we have a custom resource with kind application set, and we're trying to deploy this particular application, Argo CD application, into two clusters, engineering dev and engineering prod. I'll be commenting out this engineering prod resource pretty soon. Now, one thing to notice is the template part is pretty similar to an Argo CD application. And here, some values are dynamically injected. For example, cluster, these values would be coming from here and here, and URL value is coming from the URL fields. One other thing to notice is if you don't have a namespace, you can use this flag, create namespace equals true for the remote clusters. The first thing to do when you're deploying to multiple clusters is adding the remote cluster to Argo CD server. First, I'll log into Argo CD server. Let me go to Argo CD server by clicking this link, which will open up the Argo CD server UI. And we'll use the default admin account with the admin password. To find the admin password, if you're using OpenShift, go to Workloads, Secrets from OpenShift GitOps namespace, and you can get the OpenShift GitOps cluster secret. And that will get us logged in to the cluster. From here, if I see clusters, I can see there's only in cluster. That means where Argo CD is installed. There's no remote cluster added. In order to add the remote cluster, we have to add it through Argo CD CLI. You cannot do that from Argo CD UI. So let me log in to Argo CD server from the command line. I'll do Argo CD login. And Argo CD is pretty picky about the URL, so I have to remove the HTTPS part. The username admin and the default admin password. All right, so once you're logged in, we have to log into the remote cluster. So this is the remote cluster. Let me see if I'm already logged into the remote cluster. Yes, I'm already logged in to the remote cluster, as you can see. So we have to add this context, Argo CD cluster add, and then context. So once we do that, a service account, cluster role, and cluster role binding will be created into the remote cluster that will let Argo CD manage resources in the remote clusters. I already executed this step beforehand. That's why it says it already exists. Let's start with the list generator example. In this YAML, we have an ApplicationSet custom resource called guestbook, and we'll be deploying this application in two different clusters. One is the cluster where Argo CD is installed, and the other is a remote server. I'll uncomment these two lines shortly. So let's copy this YAML. You can create this ApplicationSet custom resource from the CLI. But if you're using OpenShift GitOps operator, you can create this ApplicationSet from the console. So we hit create ApplicationSet button, and we paste the custom resource here. Now, one thing to notice is because you're creating this ApplicationSet in a different namespace than OpenShift GitOps, guestbook-ns, you'll have to create this guestbook-ns namespace beforehand with a specific flag called managed by OpenShift GitOps. So here's that namespace. You have to create this beforehand. Notice this specific label field. So I have already done that. I'll uncomment these two lines and also update the URL field. So let me go back to my Argo CD web UI, and from cluster, I can see the remote cluster, and I'll update this value, which is engineering prod. And let's create this ApplicationSet. So once I create that, under application, I can see these two Argo CD applications are being created. One in the cluster where Argo CD is deployed, and one is in the remote cluster. Both apps are synced and healthy. If I try to delete one of these applications, you'll see that the applications will be out of sync shortly, but ApplicationSet controller will recreate this application because these applications were created using ApplicationSet. In contrast, if you created these two applications separately using Argo CD, you'd be able to individually delete these applications. So that was the list generator example demo. I have to delete these two applications from here using ApplicationSet, and now I'll be able to delete this application. Now let's look at the Git generator directory examples. For the Git generator directory, I have 3 different applications in the same repository: a Helm, a JSON, and a customized application. And similarly, I have to create 3 namespaces beforehand because these 3 applications are being deployed in 3 different namespaces. So this specific label allows OpenShift GitOps or Argo CD to be able to create resources in those namespaces. I have already created these 3 namespaces. Now let's look at the example for Git generator directory. I'll create ApplicationSet from the YAML view. And here you can see that path.base name, which is all the folders in this specific path, which are the 3 applications: Guestbook Helm, Guestbook JSON, and Guestbook Customize. These will be the 3 Argo CD applications that will be created. Let's create this ApplicationSet, and we should see 3 applications will be created. I did not have auto sync enabled for these 3 applications, so I'll have to manually sync this application. Once I click on sync, these 3 applications should be synced. Similarly to the previous example, if I try to manually delete any of this application, Argo CD ApplicationSet will create this application again. So that was the demo for Git generator directory, and you can practice on your own on these generators, or if you want to test out matrix generator, that example is in this repo, Argo CD ApplicationSet demo. And if you scroll down to the bottom of the page, you can see that I have an example for matrix generator as well. And this repository is based on vanilla Kubernetes.